as you know, in SystemeIO, all fields are mandatory. There is no option yet to make it optional. So how to do it? It's with a JavaScript, with a trick, but it's not official, and for sure it will come because it should already be here an option to make it optional. So let's say here we have the first name, the email, and two fields asking for information, but optional. At the moment it's not possible, so with this script, we will go into it to study it, because of course you can just copy it and use it, but if you try to understand how it works, it will be beneficial for you, because you get the idea how to do JavaScript on a SystemeIO page. So it can be interesting, and it's quite short here. You see this script, for instance, this one, all of this part, we could ignore it because it's just a piece of code in order to write in a field. That's the way I found, which works well with the engine of SystemeIO, the JavaScript engine. If we just change the value in HTML, then the engine of SystemeIO doesn't notice that there has been a change in the value. So with this way, we change the value and we spread the signal. We inform the page, the JavaScript, that it has been changed. So this is what it does. You don't need to learn what it does. Just know that it's better to use this one when you want to change a value in a field on SystemeIO and maybe on other things. But of course, if you control all the HTML, you don't need this. You can just change the value attribute of the field and it will work. But because there is an engine working on the page, an external one, the one from SystemeIO that they use, I don't know which one it is, but it's not important. It is looking at everything happening, so it needs to be alerted. So this part we can ignore it. We just call this function one time in the script. So first, I did it so that you can put as many optional fields as you want. So the first thing is to set a variable. So it's called gems champ facultatif, which means optional fields. And here you put the attribute ID of the fields that you want, with a double quotes and a comma to separate. So here I have two. And those attribute ID, you know where you get them on SystemeIO page editor. When you click on an element, on the left menu at the bottom, you can see the attribute ID. So that's the one you report here. And then there is another variable here, gems button. It's the button where people click and it sends the form. So the same, you need the attribute ID of this. Then when you have changed this, all the script works. No need to change anything. But let's dive in what it does here. It's only this part which is working actively. So first, you see that the last line, this one, and the top line here, it's just to say that we should wait for the page to be loaded before doing what is inside. So you do that with a window.addEventListener for the load event. And then you define what it does. And you have the event, but we don't need the event. But here we define what it will do. And inside, what happens is just the button. We set it to the element. So get element by ID. And with gems button is the variable here, that where you put the attribute ID of the button. So here you just create a variable which is the button element. And with this button at the second line, we add an event listener for the click. So for the click on the button. So now we are here, only those lines. And the click event has a particularity because on SystemeIO, the engine of SystemeIO is already listening for the click on the buttons. So that's why at the end here I have true for this add event listener. I have a true, which means it's for the capture phase, because for the events you have three phases, and the first one is the capture phase. And the default event listener on SystemeIO, I have seen that it is not in the capture phase, it is after. So we can execute something, a script, before the script of SystemeIO, which is listening also for the click, but it will start after. Because if you're on the capture phase, you will start before. So that's where we will look for all the optional fields, And if they are empty, we will add a space inside. That's all it does. And because there is a space, they are not empty. So the script of SystemeIO will look, are they empty? Because he wants to check this. It makes them mandatory this way. He looks, if it's empty, then it will refuse the form and display an error message saying that this field is mandatory. So because there is a space inside those fields, then it's fine and it sends the form. That's the mechanism that this script uses. It just look for empty fields and put a space into them, and does nothing else. And the script of SystemeIO checks that all the fields have something, so a space is something, and it sends it and it saves it. But SystemeIO has also another mechanism, a cleaning mechanism, is that it will strip out the spaces that people, when they enter the form, maybe for the email address or their name, sometimes they start with a space and they write their name and they end with a space. So SystemeIO, before saving those into the contact information, the contact profile, it will clean up the extra space before and after the value. So because there is a space, it is okay, it has content. So after then it cleans it, it removes the space, and it saves the information in the contact. So in effect, when you look at your contact, those fields have no value. They don't even have a space inside. So it works, it makes them optional. But you see, it's a trickery. So it's best when it will be an option to have a fields optional, but we cannot wait forever because SystemeIO is here since 5 years already, and this option should have been on the very first day. So imagine those who have waited until SystemeIO finally does optional fields 5 years ago. No, it's not serious. So maybe they will do it in another 5 years. In the meantime, we can use this, and you have to know that this script will not make problem, because even if a field can be optional in the future, this will also work because it just add a space if it's empty. So it's optional or not, it works the same. So let's finish with this, what it does when it's listening. Here is just a loop for each fields attribute ID that we have put here. If we put only one, then the loop will be only one time. If we put 10, it will be 10 times, but it's just a loop. And what it does with each attribute ID, it says what I said. So if the value equals nothing, then we call this function here that I talked about at the beginning. It calls this to change the value. So it just says to target this field, so the one we are in the loop at the moment, and to add a space. So a space is a quote, space, and a quote. If it's empty, then we put a space inside. If it is not empty, but we don't touch it. So you see that's the end of this tutorial. You can copy. It will be best to copy this code. You take a screenshot because it will. It's not very long, and you carefully do it. It is a training. In the future, if you want to do something else, you can use this as a starting point to do other things. Maybe, we can find some ideas. Instead of looking, is it empty, we could look for, does it have this value? Then we want to change it by this value. Maybe there is something else to do, some ideas with the same structure. That's it. Bye-bye.